Commander Zyrax stood on the observation deck of the Valorian warship and watched the small blue planet spin slowly in the darkness of space. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he studied the data streams flowing across his viewing screen. The humans had only been part of the galactic community for 50 years, a mere heartbeat in the long history of the cosmos. Yet something about this young species had caught the attention of the Valorian High Council. "They are so fragile," said Subcommander Threx, stepping up beside his leader. His armored scales clicked together as he moved. "Their bodies break so easily. Their lifespans are short. Why does the Council want us to study them?" Zyrax turned one pair of eyes toward his subordinate while keeping the other pair fixed on Earth. "Because they keep winning battles they should lose. Because they survive in places where they should die. The Council wants to know how." The Valorians were known throughout the galaxy as the greatest warriors. Their species had evolved on a harsh world of constant volcanic activity and predator attacks. They stood 8 feet tall, covered in natural armor, with strength that could crush stone. For 10,000 years, they had been the military backbone of the Galactic Federation. No species had ever matched them in combat. But the humans had done something no other species had done. They had fought the Valorians to a standstill in their first contact war, despite being outmatched in every measurable way. The war had lasted only 3 months before peace was declared, but in that time, the humans had shown something that the Valorians could not explain with their data and their logic. "We will observe them closely," Zyrax said. "The Council has given us 1 standard year to study human military capabilities. We will embed with their forces, watch how they train, and learn what makes them different." 3 days later, Zyrax and a team of 12 Valorian observers landed at Fort Mitchell, a human military training facility in a place called Texas. The heat of the sun beat down on their armored bodies, and they noted how the human soldiers walked around in simple fabric uniforms that offered no protection at all. Colonel Sarah Chen met them at the landing pad. She was small, even for a human, barely reaching the middle of Zyrax's chest. Her black hair was pulled back tightly, and her dark eyes showed no fear as she looked up at the towering aliens. "Commander Zyrax," she said, extending her hand. "Welcome to Fort Mitchell. We're honored to have you here." Zyrax had studied human customs. He reached down and gently closed his massive clawed hand around hers. "Thank you, Colonel Chen. My team is eager to begin our observations." "I've arranged for you to observe our basic training program first," Chen said, leading them across the dusty ground toward a collection of buildings. "You'll see how we turn civilians into soldiers." The Valorians followed her, their heavy footsteps leaving deep prints in the earth. Around them, young humans in identical clothing ran in formation, their voices raised in rhythmic chanting. Sweat poured down their faces in the brutal heat. "They are suffering," Threx observed quietly to Zyrax. "The temperature is causing them significant physical distress." Zyrax nodded. The humans had evolved in a narrow temperature range. Too hot and their bodies failed. Too cold and they died. Yet here they were, running and training in conditions that clearly pushed them to their limits. "Why do you train in such harsh conditions?" Zyrax asked Colonel Chen. She glanced back at him with a small smile. "Because war doesn't wait for comfortable weather. Our soldiers need to be able to fight anywhere in any conditions. If they can't handle a Texas summer, they won't survive a battlefield." This answer intrigued Zyrax. The Valorians trained in controlled environments, carefully designed to build strength and skill without risking injury. The idea of deliberately causing discomfort during training was strange to him. Over the next several days, the Valorians watched everything. They saw young humans wake before dawn and exercise until their muscles shook. They saw them run until they vomited, then get up and run more. They saw them crawl through mud and swim through freezing water and climb obstacles that seemed designed to cause failure. "Many of them are failing," Threx reported to Zyrax after the first week. "Their bodies are breaking down. Some have been removed from training due to injury. But others keep going, Zyrex said. Watch those ones. Watch what happens when they reach their limits. Private James Rodriguez was one of the humans Zyrex chose to observe closely. Rodriguez was not the strongest or the fastest in his training group. He was average in most ways, with brown skin, a ready smile, and a tendency to talk too much. But Zyrex had noticed something about him during a particularly brutal training exercise. The exercise had required the humans to carry heavy packs across 20 miles of rough terrain in extreme heat. By mile 15, Rodriguez was stumbling. His face was red and his breathing was ragged. His body was clearly telling him to stop. But he did not stop. Zyrex watched Rodriguez's eyes during those final 5 miles. He saw something there that he had never seen in any other species. It was not just determination or stubbornness. It was something deeper, something that seemed to disconnect the human's mind from his body's signals of distress. Rodriguez finished the march dead last, barely conscious, and immediately collapsed. Medical personnel rushed to help him, pouring water over his overheated body and checking his vital signs. He almost killed himself, Threx said with confusion. Why did he not stop when his body told him to? Zyrex did not have an answer, but he was beginning to understand why the council had sent them here. That evening, Zyrex requested permission to speak with Private Rodriguez in the medical building. The young human was sitting up in bed, drinking water and looking exhausted but somehow satisfied. "Commander," Rodriguez said, trying to sit up straighter, "I'm sorry you had to see that, not my best performance." "You finished the march," Zyrex said. "Many did not." Rodriguez shrugged. "I wasn't going to quit. My grandfather always said that the body gives up long before the mind does. You just have to convince yourself that the body is wrong. And if the body is right, if pushing further causes permanent damage." The human's face grew thoughtful. "Then you accept that and keep going anyway. Some things are more important than being comfortable. Some things are more important than being safe." Zyrex left the medical building with more questions than answers. He had seen Valorian warriors fight through injury and pain. That was part of being a soldier. But this was different. The humans seemed to have a capacity for suffering that went beyond anything the Valorians had encountered. They could override their own survival instincts through sheer force of will. Colonel Chen found him standing outside, looking up at the stars. "Learning anything useful, Commander?" she asked. "I am learning that we do not understand your species at all," Zyrex admitted. "Our scientists told us that humans were weak. Our analysts told us that your military technology was inferior to ours, but those assessments missed something important." "What's that?" Zyrex turned to look at her with all 4 of his eyes. "They missed the fact that you do not know when to stop. They missed the fact that you will break yourselves trying to achieve the impossible. They missed the fact that your greatest strength is not in your bodies or your weapons, but somewhere else entirely." Chen nodded slowly. "We call it the human spirit, Commander. It's gotten us into a lot of trouble over the years, but it's also gotten us out of a lot of trouble." "I would like to see more," Zyrex said. "I would like to understand this human spirit better." "Then stick around," Chen said, "because you haven't seen anything yet." 2 months into their observation mission, the Valorians had filled thousands of pages with notes and recordings. They had watched human soldiers train in deserts and jungles, in mountains and swamps. They had seen them operate in temperatures that should have killed them and in conditions that should have broken them. But it was during a joint training exercise that Zyrex truly began to understand what made humans dangerous. The exercise was designed to simulate a rescue mission in hostile territory. A mixed team of human and Valorian soldiers would infiltrate a mock enemy base, rescue simulated hostages, and extract to a safe zone. The Valorians had agreed to participate to build relations between their forces. Zyrex assigned his best warriors to the mission: Threx, and 5 other Valorians who had served with distinction in dozens of real combat operations. The humans sent a squad of 12 soldiers from their Special Operations Forces, led by a sergeant named Maria Santos. From the beginning, Xyrax noticed how differently the two groups approached the mission. His Valorians planned methodically, accounting for every variable and preparing for every contingency. They calculated optimal routes, assigned specific roles, and developed detailed response protocols for potential complications. The humans did something different. They gathered in a loose circle and talked, not about specific plans or detailed protocols, but about concepts. They discussed what they would do if things went wrong in general terms. They talked about trusting each other and staying flexible. "This is not proper planning," Threx said privately to Xyrax. "They are leaving too much to chance." "Perhaps," Xyrax replied, "but let us see how they perform." The exercise began at midnight. The combined team moved through thick forest toward the target building. The Valorians moved with practiced precision, their armored bodies surprisingly quiet despite their size. The humans moved differently, more loosely, constantly adjusting their formation based on the terrain. At the first checkpoint, they encountered simulated enemy forces. The Valorians immediately executed their planned response, taking cover and returning fire in coordinated bursts. The humans did something unexpected. Instead of following the plan, Sergeant Santos made a hand signal, and half her squad broke off to circle around the enemy position. "That was not the agreed strategy," Threx said over the communication channel. "The agreed strategy wasn't working," Santos replied calmly. "Adapt and overcome." The flanking maneuver caught the simulated enemies off guard. Within minutes, the combined team had eliminated the threat and was moving again. But now the mission parameters had changed. The enemy knew they were coming. What happened next would stay with Xyrax for the rest of his long life. The team reached the target building to find it more heavily defended than expected. The simulation controllers had added extra challenges to test the team's response to unexpected pressure. Xyrax's tactical analysis showed that a frontal assault had only a 12% chance of success. He was about to call for a withdrawal and replanning when Santos spoke up. "Commander, I have an idea, but it's risky." "Explain." "My team will create a distraction on the east side. We'll draw their fire and make them think we're trying to breach there. Your Valorians hit the west entrance while they're focused on us." "The mathematics do not favor this plan," Threx said. "Your team will take significant casualties acting as a distraction." Santos smiled, though there was no humor in it. "That's kind of what we do, Sub-Commander. We take the hits so the mission succeeds." Xyrax studied the small human woman. She was offering to put herself and her soldiers in danger, possibly severe danger, to give the mission a better chance of success. This was not logical. This was not efficient. But there was something in her eyes that told him she meant every word. "We will proceed with your plan," Xyrax said. The distraction worked exactly as Santos predicted. Her team made a loud, aggressive approach on the east side, drawing all enemy attention and fire. They took multiple simulated hits, and 3 of her soldiers were marked as casualties within the first minute. But they kept fighting, kept drawing fire, kept buying time. Meanwhile, Xyrax led his Valorians through the west entrance with almost no resistance. They secured the simulated hostages and called for extraction. The mission was a success. But when Xyrax found Santos after the exercise, she was sitting alone, her head in her hands. 3 of her people had been marked as killed in action, and 4 more as wounded. If this had been a real mission, she would have lost most of her squad. "You seem troubled," Xyrax said, sitting down beside her despite his bulk. "I am," she admitted. "I made the call that got my people killed. That's on me." "The mission was successful. The hostages were rescued." "I know." She looked up at him and he saw tears in her eyes. "That's what makes it worth it. And that's what makes it so hard. Every soldier who dies under my command, I have to believe their death meant something. I have to believe the mission was worth the cost. Because if I don't believe that, then I can't do this job." Zyrax sat with her in silence for a long time, processing what she had said. The Valorians valued victory, of course, but they had always calculated success in terms of efficiency. Minimal losses for maximum gains. The idea of accepting losses, of weighing lives against objectives and choosing to spend those lives, was foreign to them. "How do you carry that weight?" he finally asked. "How do you make those decisions?" Santos wiped her eyes and straightened her shoulders. "You don't carry it alone. You carry it with your team, with your brothers and sisters, and you honor those who fall by making sure their sacrifice matters, by never wasting what they gave." In that moment, Zyrax understood something crucial about humans. They were not just physically adaptable. They were emotionally and psychologically adaptable in ways the Valorians had never considered. They could process grief and loss and keep fighting. They could make terrible decisions and live with the consequences. They could break and still function. The Valorians were strong in body. The humans were strong in something deeper. Zyrax began writing his preliminary report to the High Council that night. His observations were starting to form a clear picture, though it was not a picture he had expected to see. "The humans possess a quality that our language does not adequately describe," he wrote. "They call it resilience, but this word does not capture its full meaning. It is the ability to be damaged and continue functioning. It is the ability to fail and try again. It is the ability to suffer and find meaning in that suffering. We have underestimated them badly, and I believe we should be grateful that our first contact war ended when it did." He paused, considering his next words carefully. "I recommend that we pursue a formal alliance with humanity, not because they are strong in the ways we understand strength, but because they are strong in ways we are not. They fill gaps in our capabilities that we did not know we had." The third month of observations brought the Valorians to a place called Antarctica. It was a frozen wasteland at the bottom of Earth, where temperatures dropped so low that even the hardy Valorians needed thermal assistance to survive. Yet the humans maintained a permanent military and scientific presence there. Zyrax had requested to visit after reading about the human history of polar exploration. He was fascinated by the stories of early human explorers who had ventured into these frozen lands with primitive equipment and incomplete understanding of what they would face. Many had died. Those who survived had done so through sheer will and determination. The current Antarctic base was named Scott Station, after one of those early explorers who had frozen to death trying to reach the South Pole. Zyrax found it strange that humans would name a base after someone who had failed and died. The Valorians named their installations after great victories, not tragic defeats. "Why honor someone who did not succeed?" he asked the base commander, a weathered man named Colonel Petrov. Petrov smiled beneath his thick beard. "Because he tried. Because he pushed himself to his absolute limit and beyond. Because his failure taught us what we needed to know to eventually succeed. We learn from our failures, Commander. We honor those who fail nobly almost as much as those who succeed." This concept was entirely foreign to Valorian thinking. Failure was shame. Failure was forgotten. To celebrate failure seemed perverse. But as Zyrax observed the humans operating in this brutal environment, he began to understand their perspective. Everything about Antarctica was hostile to human life. The cold would kill them in minutes without proper protection. The isolation and darkness of winter could break their minds. The logistical challenges of keeping the base supplied were enormous. Yet they stayed. Year after year, rotation after rotation, humans chose to live and work in this frozen hell, not because it was easy, but precisely because it was hard. "We do this to prove that we can," Petrov explained during a tour of the facility. "Every impossible thing we do opens the door to doing more impossible things. Our ancestors crossed oceans in wooden boats because they refused to believe the world was too big. We put men on the moon because we refused to believe space was too far. We survive here because we refuse to believe any environment can truly defeat us. During their second week at Scott Station, a crisis occurred that would forever change Xyrax's understanding of human adaptation. A research team had been caught in a sudden storm while conducting experiments 50 kilometers from the base. Their transport vehicle had been damaged, their communications were limited, and they were running low on heating fuel. The storm was too severe for aerial rescue, and the ground conditions made vehicle travel nearly impossible. Petrov gathered his emergency response team and laid out the situation. We have 8 people trapped out there. They have maybe 12 hours of heat left, and this storm won't break for at least 18 hours. Any rescue attempt on the ground is extremely dangerous. Then we wait for the storm to pass and recover the bodies, said one of the base officers grimly. That's not happening, Petrov said. Those are our people. We don't leave our people behind. A young sergeant raised her hand. Sir, I can make it. If I take one of the modified snow vehicles and travel light, I can reach them before they run out of heat. The storm will kill you, someone protested. Maybe, the sergeant agreed, but if I don't try, they definitely die. Xyrax watched this exchange with growing fascination. The mathematics were clear. 1 life risked against 8 lives potentially saved. But it was not the math that drove this decision. It was something else, something he was beginning to recognize as uniquely human. What is your name? Xyrax asked the sergeant. Yuki Tanaka, sir. Sergeant Tanaka, you understand that you may die in this attempt. Yes, sir. And you still wish to go. She looked at him with eyes that held no doubt, no hesitation. They're my friends, Commander, my team. I'd rather die trying to save them than live knowing I didn't try. Xyrax made a decision then that surprised even himself. I will accompany you. Every Valorian and human in the room turned to stare at him. Threx stepped forward. Commander, this is unnecessary. Your life is too valuable to risk on a rescue mission. Perhaps, Xyrax said, but I came here to understand humans. I cannot understand them by only watching. I must participate. The journey through the storm was the most brutal experience of Xyrax's life. His species had evolved in harsh conditions, but nothing had prepared him for the Antarctic blizzard. Wind tore at his thermal suit. Ice formed on his armored scales. Visibility dropped to nearly 0. But beside him, Sergeant Tanaka drove the vehicle with unwavering focus. She could not see more than a few meters ahead, yet she navigated by instruments and instinct, constantly adjusting their course. When the vehicle became stuck in a drift, she jumped out into the killing cold to dig them free, her small human body shaking violently from the temperature. You should let me do that, Xyrax said. The cold affects you more. I'm smaller, she replied through chattering teeth. I can reach the undercarriage better. Besides, I've trained for this, trust me. And he did. For reasons he could not fully explain, Xyrax trusted this tiny, fragile human with his life. She had a certainty about her that transcended physical capability. She believed she could do this, and that belief was contagious. They reached the stranded team with less than an hour of heat remaining in their shelter. The 8 researchers were hypothermic and terrified, but alive. The vehicle was not designed to carry so many, but Tanaka figured out how to fit everyone inside by removing non-essential equipment and having people share seats. The return journey was somehow even harder. The vehicle was overloaded and slow. The storm showed no signs of braking. Several times, Xyrax thought they would not make it. But Tanaka never wavered. When the engine began to fail, she improvised repairs in the freezing wind. When one of the researchers stopped breathing, she performed resuscitation while Xyrax drove. When they finally reached the base, she was the last one out of the vehicle, making sure everyone else got to safety first. She collapsed in the snow just outside the base entrance. Zyrax caught her before she hit the ground and carried her inside. The medical team rushed to treat her for severe hypothermia and frostbite. For several hours, her survival was uncertain. Zyrax did not leave her bedside. When she finally woke, he was there. "You saved 8 lives today, Sergeant Tanaka." "We saved them," she corrected weakly. "I couldn't have done it without you." "I merely followed your lead. You showed me something today that I have never seen before." "What's that?" Zyrax considered his words carefully. "I have seen courage in my life. I have seen bravery and determination, but I have never seen a being push themselves so far past their physical limits and somehow succeed anyway. Your body should have failed many times during that journey. Your equipment was inadequate. The odds were against us from the start, yet you never considered failure as an option." Tanaka smiled weakly. "There's an old human saying, Commander, failure is not an option. It doesn't mean failure is impossible. It means we refuse to accept it. We refuse to let it be the end of the story." That night, Zyrax added significantly to his report. "The humans have a relationship with failure that we do not understand," he wrote. "They do not see failure as an endpoint but as a challenge to be overcome. When they say that failure is not an option, they do not mean that failure cannot happen. They mean that they will not stop fighting until they succeed or die trying. This mindset allows them to attempt things that no rational being would attempt, and sometimes, against all logic and probability, they succeed." He paused, then added, "After today, I believe that an alliance with humanity would not just be beneficial for the Valorian people. It may be essential for our future." The 5th month of observations took the Valorians to a human spacecraft carrier in deep space. The vessel was called the United Earth-Ship Constitution, and it was humanity's largest military ship, carrying over 5,000 crew members. Compared to Valorian warships, it was small and lightly armed. But Zyrax was no longer interested in comparing specifications. He was interested in watching how humans operated in the environment they had once believed would kill them: space. Humans had only been spacefaring for about 300 years. In the vast scale of galactic history, they were infants among the stars, yet they had spread through their solar system and beyond with a speed that alarmed older species. They colonized planets that seemed unsuitable for their biology. They built stations in the void that should not have been possible with their technology level. They explored with a reckless enthusiasm that bordered on insanity. "Why do you push so far, so fast?" Zyrax asked Captain James Okafor, the commander of the Constitution. "Your expansion rate exceeds your ability to properly secure your territories." Okafor, a tall man with deep brown skin and gray hair at his temples, laughed. "You sound like my grandmother. She always said I was too ambitious for my own good." "With respect, Captain, I am serious. Your species has suffered multiple colony failures, station disasters, and exploration casualties. Yet you continue to expand as if these losses mean nothing." "They mean everything," Okafor said, his expression becoming serious. "Every person we lose is a tragedy, but we can't let fear of loss stop us from moving forward. Our species has always been like this. We crossed oceans without knowing what was on the other side. We climbed mountains because they were there. We went to the moon with barely enough technology to get there and back. It's who we are." "And if you had failed to return from the moon, if those early astronauts had died?" "Then others would have tried again, and again until we succeeded." Okafor shrugged. "We're stubborn like that." During his time on the Constitution, Zyrax observed human military operations in space with new eyes. He saw how they trained for every possible disaster, running endless drills for hull breaches, fires, system failures, and enemy attacks. He saw how they improvised solutions to problems with whatever materials were available. He saw how they supported each other through the psychological challenges of long-duration space missions. One incident in particular stood out. The ship was conducting training maneuvers when a real emergency occurred. A coolant leak in the engine section had gone undetected until it reached critical levels. The engineering team had only minutes to stop the leak before a cascade failure that could destroy the ship. Xyrax was in the engineering section when the alarm sounded. He watched as a young engineer named Thomas Chen took charge of the response. Chen was small and slight, barely old enough to be called an adult by human standards. He had none of the physical presence of a leader. Yet when he started issuing orders, everyone listened. "Okay, people, we have 4 minutes until this goes very bad," Chen said, his voice calm despite the urgency. "Kowalski, I need you at the secondary coolant junction. Try to reroute flow around the breach. Martinez, get up in that access tunnel and find the exact location of the leak. I'm going to try to seal it from here." The response was immediate and coordinated. People moved with purpose, each knowing their role. Within 90 seconds, Martinez had found the leak. Within 3 minutes, Chen had devised a temporary seal using materials that were never designed for that purpose. Within 4 minutes, the crisis was over. "That was close," Chen said, wiping sweat from his face. "Way too close, but good work, everyone." Xyrax approached the young engineer afterward. "How did you know what to do? That solution was not in any manual or protocol I observed." "It wasn't," Chen admitted. "I made it up on the spot. That's kind of what engineering is, really. Taking what you have and making it work when the textbook solution isn't available. What if your improvised solution had failed? Then I would have tried something else. And if that failed, something else again. You keep trying until you find something that works or until you run out of time." Chen smiled. "My professors used to say that human engineering is about turning problems into creative opportunities." Xyrax added this observation to his growing understanding. The humans did not just adapt to survive. They adapted to thrive. Every challenge was seen not as an obstacle but as a puzzle to be solved. Every failure was not a defeat but a data point for future attempts. During the final week of his time on the Constitution, Xyrax was invited to address the crew. He stood before thousands of humans in the ship's main assembly area, looking out at faces that represented dozens of Earth nations and colonies. They were small and soft-bodied and short-lived, and they had somehow become one of the most remarkable species he had ever encountered. "I came here to study you," Xyrax said. "The Valorian High Council believed that understanding human military adaptation would give us strategic advantages. What I learned was something very different." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "Your bodies are not strong by galactic standards. Your lifespans are brief. Your technology, while creative, is not advanced. By every measure the Valorians use to assess military capability, you should be a minor power at best." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Xyrax held up a hand. "But those measures are wrong. They miss what makes you truly dangerous. You do not accept limits. When you encounter a barrier, you do not ask if it can be crossed. You ask how it can be crossed. When you fail, you do not accept failure as final. You treat it as a temporary setback, a problem to be solved. I have seen your soldiers push their bodies past breaking and still complete their missions. I have seen your people walk into certain death to save their comrades. I have seen your engineers create solutions from nothing but determination and creativity. I have seen what you call the human spirit, and I tell you truthfully, it is the most powerful weapon I have ever encountered." The assembly was silent. Then slowly, a few humans began to applaud. The applause spread until the entire hall was thundering with it. Captain Akafer approached Xyrax after the speech. "That was quite an endorsement, Commander. Should I be concerned that you've learned all our secrets?" Xyrax made the Valorian gesture of respect. "Your secrets cannot be learned, Captain. They can only be witnessed, and I believe they should be shared." "Shared?" "I am recommending to my council that we pursue a permanent military alliance with humanity, not as protectors or conquerors, but as partners. Your strengths complement our weaknesses in ways we never understood before. Together, we could be something neither species could be alone. Okafor extended his hand. I'd like that, Commander. I think we'd make one hell of a team. Xyrax took the hand, careful with his grip. One hell of a team, he repeated, trying out the human phrase. Yes, I believe we would. The request for a permanent military alliance was presented to the Valorian High Council 9 months after Xyrax began his observations. He stood before the 12 most powerful Valorians in the galaxy, his report consisting of thousands of pages of data, video recordings, and analysis. But he knew that data alone would not convince them. Counselors, he began, I have spent the past year among the humans. I have trained with their soldiers, survived emergencies alongside their crews, and witnessed their remarkable capacity for adaptation. My conclusion is simple. We need them. Counselor Vrath, the eldest member of the council, leaned forward. Need them. The Valorians have never needed anyone, Commander. We have been the greatest warriors in the galaxy for 10,000 years. And in 10,000 years, Counselor, we have never faced an enemy like the Kreth Swarm. Silence fell over the chamber. The Kreth Swarm was the great threat that lurked at the edge of known space. For centuries, they had been dormant, but recent intelligence suggested they were preparing to expand. When they did, they would sweep across the galaxy like a plague of living machines. The humans cannot help us against the Kreth, said Counselor Myra. Their military forces are small and their technology is limited. With respect, Counselor, that is incorrect. Xyrax activated his presentation display. Let me show you what I learned. He played recordings of his observations, the soldiers pushing through impossible conditions, the rescue in Antarctica, the engineering miracle on the Constitution. He showed them data on human military history, highlighting the countless times humans had won battles they should have lost. The humans have a quality that we lack, Xyrax said. They can adapt in real time to any situation. They can improvise solutions that no other species would consider. Most importantly, they refuse to accept defeat, even when defeat is logical and reasonable. Against the Kreth, logic and reason will not save us. The swarm adapts to every strategy, overwhelms every defense, consumes every world in its path. We cannot outfight them through strength alone. We cannot outplan them through superior tactics, but we might, just might, be able to outadapt them with human help. Counselor Vrath stroked his scaled chin. You speak of this human spirit. Can it truly be as powerful as you describe? I witnessed it myself, Counselor. I was with a young human woman who drove through a storm that should have killed her to save 8 people. I asked her why she would risk her life for others. She said she would rather die trying to save them than live knowing she didn't try. That is not logic. No, it is not. It is something else. Something that, with respect, we have lost over our 10,000 years of military supremacy. Xyrax looked around the chamber. We have become so efficient, so optimized, that we have forgotten how to fight when optimization fails. The humans have never known anything else. They have always been the underdog, always faced challenges too great for their capabilities, and they keep winning anyway. The council debated for 3 days. Xyrax waited, knowing that the decision could reshape the future of the galaxy. On the 4th day, Counselor Vrath summoned him. The council has reached a decision, Commander. We will pursue your recommended alliance on one condition. Name it, Counselor. You will serve as the primary liaison between our forces. You will work with the humans to develop joint training programs, shared strategies, and combined operational procedures. If this alliance is to work, it will require someone who understands both species. Xyrax bowed his head in acceptance. I would be honored, Counselor. The formal alliance was announced 1 month later. Xyrax stood on the observation deck of the Constitution as the Valorian flagship arrived for the signing ceremony. Around him, human officers and crew watched with a mixture of awe and nervousness as the massive alien vessel approached. Colonel Chen, now promoted to general and assigned as Zyrax's human counterpart, stood beside him. "Nervous, Commander." "Should I be?" History is being made. The two greatest warrior species in the galaxy officially joining forces. I think a little nervousness is appropriate. Zyrax considered this. "I am not nervous about the alliance. I am hopeful." "Hopeful?" "My people have been warriors for 10,000 years. We have conquered and defended and fought in countless wars. But somewhere along the way, we forgot why we fight. We forgot that strength without purpose is meaningless." He turned to face Chen. "Your people reminded me, you fight for each other, you suffer for each other, you die for each other. That is a strength we have not known for centuries." The signing ceremony was elaborate, combining Valorian traditions of honor with human symbols of unity. Zyrax signed on behalf of the Valorian military, while General Chen signed for the United Earth Forces. When they clasped hands, a new chapter in galactic history began. Over the next several years, the alliance proved its worth dozens of times. Human units trained alongside Valorian forces, each species learning from the other. The Valorians taught humans their advanced combat techniques and tactical discipline. The humans taught the Valorians something more valuable: how to improvise, how to adapt, how to keep fighting when all seemed lost. When the Kreth swarm finally emerged, the combined forces of humanity and the Valorian people met them at the Battle of Proxima Station. It was the largest military engagement in galactic history, pitting the Alliance against an enemy that had consumed entire civilizations. The battle lasted for 72 hours. The swarm adapted to every strategy, just as predicted. They overwhelmed defensive positions and consumed warships by the dozen. By every logical measure, the Alliance should have lost. But logic did not account for a young human pilot who flew her damaged fighter into the swarm's command node, destroying it at the cost of her own life. It did not account for a Valorian captain who learned from his human allies to improvise a new weapons configuration that the swarm had never encountered. It did not account for the thousands of small moments where humans and Valorians fought together, covered each other, saved each other. The swarm was driven back. Not destroyed, not yet, but wounded and scattered. The Alliance had achieved what no single species could have achieved alone. Zyrax stood on the deck of his new command ship, a hybrid vessel designed with both Valorian and human technology, and watched the retreating swarm. Beside him stood his command staff, a mixed crew of both species who had learned to trust each other completely. "We won," said Commander Sarah Rodriguez, the daughter of the young man Zyrax had observed so many years ago. "We actually won." "This battle, yes," Zyrax said. "The swarm will return, they always do. And we'll beat them again." Zyrax turned to look at his human officer. "That is exactly what I expected you to say." "Because it's true. Because you are human. Because your species does not know how to accept defeat. Because you will keep fighting until you win or until the universe ends." Rodriguez smiled. "Is that a compliment?" "It is a statement of fact. When I first came to Earth, I thought I was studying a primitive species. I was wrong. I was studying the most adaptable, most resilient, most stubbornly hopeful species in the galaxy, and now that stubbornness will help us save everyone." She clasped his arm in the gesture of friendship that humans and Valorians had developed together. "We couldn't do it without you, Commander, without your people." "No," Zyrax agreed. "Neither could we. That is the point of alliance, to be stronger together than either could be alone." He looked back at the stars, at the vast galaxy that the swarm still threatened. The war was far from over. But for the first time in his long life, Zyrax felt something he had never expected to feel. He felt hope, human hope, the stubborn, illogical, wonderful belief that no matter how dark things seemed, tomorrow could be better. It was contagious, that hope. It spread through the Valorian people like a welcome disease, changing them in ways they were only beginning to understand. The humans had taught them how to hope again, and with hope came the strength to face anything the universe could throw at them. Together,